Hey guys, David here and welcome to another video. In front of me I have the Laserstorm S10 from Pergear, or as you more probably know it as the Atomstack S7 Pro, and it has an incredibly powerful laser attachment that combines two 5-watt lasers into a full true 10-watt laser, and it also has a convenient touchscreen remote for it and a bunch of other bells and whistles. But can it actually make use of that power, and is it any good? Well, we'll find out. Now, full disclosure, Pergear did send over this machine for me to take a look at it, but they have no influence over what I'm saying in this video and have also agreed to my review policy. Now, if you're like me, you've probably never heard of Pergear, unless you're active in the photo video space. As far as I can tell, so far this is their first entry into kind of this DIY world, where before they just sold various video accessories. And after taking a look at this machine, it is very obvious that this is not something that they created. This is an Atomstack S10 Pro that has been rebranded for them. Now, I do not know what the relationship with Atomstack is, if it's a collaboration or if they're just kind of buying reject units, so I don't really know what's going on, but I'll treat this as a machine from Pergear for now, but if you are thinking of the Atomstack S7 Pro, it's probably going to be pretty much exactly the same with just a different logo on it. Setting this laser up is pretty standard as compared to most other lasers. It is not using a very new design. The frame is the same as on the Atomstack S5, which is one of their older lasers. It's using just simple belts held in place with just some screws clamping down on them, which is not great. It works, but kind of a pain to set up. Standard feet, it's very similar construction as a dozen other lasers are using as well. It's not great, but it works. The assembly took maybe a half an hour. Though, if you have never assembled one of these lasers before, the manual, well, what's the technical term for it? Well, it's crap, I'm sorry. But I would not have been able to put this laser together just with the use of the manual. The relevant steps for assembling the mechanical part is depicted in 3 tiny pictures with barely any text, and how you're supposed to use these little T-nuts to clamp down on the belt is not mentioned really at all. It then goes into great detail on how to configure the software and whatnot, which in my opinion is a lot easier, but kind of just glosses over the rest. But there are plenty of other videos online that you can check out, as this assembly method is basically the same as for 80% of other laser engravers of this style. Then moving on to kind of a physical overview, up here in the front you have this kind of magnetically attached touchscreen remote. It's just connected with an HDMI cable, but it's definitely carrying more than just HDMI. And it is connected to this kind of enclosure here with this absolutely gorgeous emergency off switch. I've never seen one that it looked quite this nice with like super bright red anodizing, feels super premium. I mean, it's an emergency off switch, it could be plastic for all I care. Next to it is power in, USB port, SD card for offline printing, power on button and a reset button. For me, the reset button didn't do anything, but don't really need it. And the only kind of complaint I have of this is that usually, right now it's going the other way, but for me, this power cable was always just right over the emergency off switch, which is not a great place for it to be, as if you were just wanted to slam on it to quickly turn off the machine, which is what you want to use an emergency off switch for, then the cable would be in the way of you hitting it. It would have been great if they would switch the ports and the emergency off switch just in location, and that way it would be a lot easier to reach. All the buttons would be on one side, the ports on the other side, but that's a minor detail. The interface itself is usable. It's not a great screen, it's just a very cheap kind of resistive touchscreen that is recessed quite a bit into the case, so touching anything at the very border is kind of hard. Plus, some of the UI elements are designed just perfectly in size, so you could conveniently hit it without them requiring too much space. But selecting a file from the list the items are too small. It's like even with my fingers, which are not particularly thick, I many times clicked on the wrong thing and had to go back and try again to click on the right thing. Or since it's resistive touch, you can also just use a screwdriver or anything else to use it. But it would have been great if that was slightly scaled. In general, the UI is not great. It's usable, but on the longer Ray 5, which also has a touchscreen, review of which should come out soon, the interface is a lot better and just more convenient to use and better looking. Otherwise, you have standard functions. You can select your design, jog the laser around. There are also homing switches, so you can use absolute positioning, which is used by default. You want to watch out if you're not used to that, but you can also set a different homing location and then it will engrave from there. It also has features to kind of do an outline for where you're going to engrave, but for all the files I've tried, this did not work and was just plain wrong. And if you try to do that on a file that is quite large, like image engraving, then it will just load image forever and basically be stuck and you have to restart the machine. That is the same as I've experienced on other systems, but still kind of not very user-friendly. But after that, you can just hit start. You can select how many times you want to engrave it. And what is quite convenient is during the engraving, you can change the speed and the laser power up and down, which is really nice for dialing stuff in. Or if you just realize, oh, I should have just done slightly more power or slightly slower or something like that. But if you do not want to use this with the SD card, you can of course also connect it over USB to Lightburn, where it got immediately recognized by the automatic laser finder and all the settings got imported correctly and just worked first try. No need to set anything up. That's really convenient and I have not had that with many lasers. Then moving on to the laser head itself. This is the M50 from Atomstack, and the way it works is that it has two separate high-powered laser diodes. They are, as far as I can tell, the same ones as all the other brands are using in their top-end lasers. And it is using a special mirror that combines the light of these two laser diodes into a single stream. What this means is that you effectively have double the power minus some small losses. And the way they have configured it, as far as I can tell, is that they actually have not met up the focus points directly. So one of them is focused slightly higher with the other one slightly lower. And what that does is that you effectively get a larger depth in which the laser is well enough in focus to be able to cut. What this means is that they claim you can cut up to 20 millimeters of wood. Well, I've tried that. I was not quite able to get that. I also don't have a lot of 20 millimeter wood to try, but cutting stuff like 8mm plywood was just a breeze and worked really well. This does mean, however, though, that you will not get the quite doubling in power for things like engraving. But still, engraving on this machine was an absolute treat when it comes to high power stuff. But I'll get more into that in the results section. It is not all sunshine and roses though with this M50 laser, and for one, the fan of it is obnoxiously loud, and the way it is controlled with this machine, it is always on. So the moment I turn on the machine, you can hear the fan, and I'm going to turn it off in a second here, since I'm sure that was not very pleasant to listen to. And funnily enough, actually, when the laser is running at full power, the power management is not done well enough to the point where the voltage drops and the fan actually spins quite a bit slower, becoming more quiet in the one moment where it should actually run at full tilt and actually cool the laser. I noticed that when I was engraving quite slowly at full power, the laser did get quite hot. And I could see that being a problem at some point. That if you're doing a big engraving on something like metal, that the laser might overheat or that it will not output quite as much power after it has reached a certain temperature. I've not done any detailed testing on that since I don't really have the right equipment for it, but I definitely can see this laser overheating. Which is not really a big surprise since it does pack a lot of power. Before I'm going to get into the results section though, I have to address one more point. Or well, it's kind of one and a half, they're somewhat connected. And that is quality control and safety. I can in this case only speak for the Pergear model, since I do not know if Atomstack has tighter quality control on their machines that they release. But for me, the little protective screen that is in front of the laser here that makes sure that you don't see in it, it's quite a fancy thing. It's like not just a tinted piece of acrylic, but some sort of special film. And while for regular sitting position, the angle, it blocked the light perfectly and felt really safe. At certain angles, there were probably some holes in this coating, and you got basically exposed to the full laser light. And what makes this so much worse, if it was just like that, just wear the goggles that are included. Except wait, they did not include any laser safety goggles. They were so sure of their genius system here that they did not include any safety goggles, which would have cost them, I don't know, $1 at most on a machine that costs $600. And instead they decided, well, let's not do that. And still, even if this had no holes in it and worked perfectly, there is light refracting from the bottom. If you're setting something up, you might get some light channeled. This machine really needs to include safety goggles. There's no way around it. They're so cheap. Why not? Every other laser I've gotten so far has always included safety goggles, even though they had like protective shields around the laser. And there was one more kind of quality control issue, and that is, well, the manual tells you how to tighten the eccentric nuts to make sure that all these roller wheels have the perfect tension. On the x-axis, it was actually tensioned too much. And what that means, since these wheels are plastic, one of them was dented. After I adjusted it to be the right pressure, it was barely able to move at all. It had little bumps in it. Just like every time the wheel turned once around, there was a little hump in it. And, well, it felt fairly smooth. Engraving an image, you can clearly see that there's little humps in it. I just had some of these wheels lying around since I've have a bunch of these lasers and stuff, so I was able to quickly replace it, but that is something that just shouldn't happen. This shouldn't be over-tightened. They intend to put it in the manual so they can shape it a bit more loose, so something like that doesn't happen, and then you can tighten it yourself. But that must have slipped through the cracks somewhere. Another small issue that there is, and I've actually seen that on the internet with people complaining on that on the Atomstack as well, is that the whole laser assembly is quite flimsy. Now, I was able to tighten it up quite a bit. I mean, one thing that can be an issue is if these wheels are too loose, but that was definitely not the issue for me. The main issue is that the way this laser mounts here, this plate is part of the M50 laser, and it has a bunch of mounting holes. And the plate underneath actually has 4 mounting holes as well. However, only 2 of them can line up at a time. And by default, the bottom 2 were screwed into this plate, and not super tightly, which meant that there's just like from up here with this fairly thin sheet metal down to 2 bolts only, down to the laser at the very bottom. Like, it was so wobbly that any engraving lines done at more than like 500 millimeters a minute were super wobbly. I moved the screw holes up to the top since this bracket is quite a bit sturdier, and I've also been always engraving on kind of a pedestal. That way I can have the laser closer to the top and not too far down. Now, I'm not sure why they built this high up. I mean, it's great if you want to engrave something taller, but I would have wished this laser to be probably like almost 4 centimeters lower, so that you can actually engrave thin stuff without having to kind of build up a pedestal for it. And my last little rant here goes to the tightening system. And while it is super convenient, just having a single big knob in the front that allows you to tighten it instead of some small ones. While it is super convenient to have a big knob in the front to just tighten the laser in place instead of some small ones from the side where you need 4 hands. The problem with this is that it is just a screw, and it is not even a particularly nice screw. And the piece that it screws onto is just regular aluminum. And just from me testing this for a couple of days, there is a bunch of marks in here, and I can already not position this everywhere I want anymore. If I'm too close to a previous mark, then instead of tightening where I'm setting it to tighten, it will actually jump to the previous mark, as there is already a little dimple in there. That is quite a big of problem and really annoying. They would have to either make sure that this bolt is very smooth in the front, which then would create less of an indentation, or have some sort of different clamping system. Now, with some of these gripes out of the way, let's get to the good stuff. And the good stuff is the power of this laser. If you're looking for a laser that has the potential of competing with a lot of CO2 lasers in terms of just raw cutting performance and ability to engrave on difficult materials, then this is the machine for you. I mean, it's to be expected. It's using basically 2 times the power of the previous already quite powerful lasers. And this means that you can easily cut through plywood all the way up to, I tested successfully 8 millimeters, but 10 millimeters will probably also work. They came up to 20 millimeters. What they showed on that picture looked a bit like balsa wood. I tried balsa wood, mine just caught on fire. So your mileage may vary. But even without an air assist, which I previously said 8 millimeters you can only really cut with an air assist, this worked quite well and really fast as well. While my speeds are not quite double necessarily what I would be able to achieve with one of the other lasers that just has a single 5-watt diode in there, I can certainly achieve 1.5 times the speed to maybe even a bit more, which is great if you want to do a lot of cutting. And on the thicker materials, I can definitely also notice what they're advertising, that the just distance of usable thickness is quite a bit bigger due to the way they arranged those 2 lasers, and that is great. Also, cutting acrylic works a treat. I was able to basically roll almost twice as fast as with some of the other lasers, which is quite nice since acrylic was rather slow before. So, just a gentle reminder again, while this machine is amazing, it still is a blue laser light diode laser that cannot cut clear acrylic, since it just goes through it. So you want to use either dark tinted or opaque acrylic to cut it. Of course, you can also cut things like leather, foam, paper, cardboard. All of that stuff is going to be no issue at all. I didn't try all of it since this laser can cut much harder stuff, so this should not be an issue at all. The only thing you have to make sure is just going to keep that power in check. This is the first time that I've actually had issues with laser catching stuff on fire. Now, a lot of that is probably also my problem, but like this balsa wood, I've never tried balsa wood before, so it might just be an issue of balsa wood. The first time I actually burned a pretty good hole into it, and it caught big on fire. Then I kind of switched to something that is a bit larger, so it doesn't cut over it quite as much and doesn't stay in one place too much. It still ended up slightly catching on fire on the side, and the insides look quite charred as well, so definitely want to be careful using the full power. And what I've noticed is you want to go really fast. All my tests I did at least at 500 millimeters a minute for cutting, and just do multiple passes. If you go any slower, it's just going to result in too much burning, essentially, just too much concentrated heat that you might be able to control better with more experience, but for me it was a lot easier to just do more passes. For the 8mm plywood, I used 7 passes at 500 millimeters a minute, which is really fast. My previous setting, I believe, was 4 to 5 passes at 200 millimeters a minute, so you can do the math on that, it's a lot faster. And acrylic, this just gonna, maybe 3mm acrylic, I was able to cut in 2 passes at around 400 millimeters a minute, which is quite decent as well. Then moving on to engraving, here is the second point that shines, and that increased laser power onto one spot just means that it can reach higher temperatures. This essentially means that engraving on stainless steel here was not just a little bit faster. Most of my other machines can also engrave on stainless steel, but it is slow. They go at like 100 or maybe 200 millimeters a minute. However, with this machine, I was able to engrave at the same darkness at around 800 millimeters a minute. That is significantly more than just a doubling, as the doubling in power would suggest. The only explanation I have for that is that just the more power can get it over a certain level to the point where it is able to do stuff like that a lot easier. So if you want to engrave on stainless steel a lot or on anodized aluminum, stuff like that, that really does require quite a bit of power, going with this machine is going to save you tremendous amounts of time. At this point, I also want to do a quick ingest about the spot size of this laser, and while they are claiming a very small spot size, I found that it is still quite decent, but it is ever so slightly larger than something like the Lasermaster 2 Pro or the other R2 machines, which are some of the best in the business, but it definitely is on par with most other lasers in terms of spot size, which is great to see considering that it is combining two lasers into one, which is something that is quite a bit more difficult to line up perfectly and have a small spot size with. Clearly the results show it. If the spot was not aligned this perfectly, it would not be able to achieve such cutting results. The only area where this increased power really is not able to be harnessed is engraving on wood, essentially. There, the controller just cannot keep up. I've seen this on quite a few laser engravers by now, that after around 3,000 to 4,000 millimeters a minute, the controller is not able to turn on and off the laser quickly enough for the various image engraving modes, such as like dithering, where you basically have a bunch of little points of varying brightness to create a grayscale image, and it just cannot keep up. So if it has to switch a bunch back and forth, it will slow down and then kind of speed up again when there's sections where the power does not change much. And that means that even though this machine can easily move at 10,000 millimeters a minute, engraving at that speed does not result in something that actually goes this fast and goes quite a bit slower. It's probably closer to around 5,000 millimeters a minute on average if you set it to 10,000. But it's kind of stuttery. I'm not sure if this video shows up too well on video, but I mean, the result is still looking nice. Just takes quite a bit longer than something like the Alfeo Laser 2, which although it has half the laser power, is able to engrave this same image at the same detail setting in almost half the time. So if your goal is to do a lot of wood engraving, then this may be not the machine for you. Also, just as a quick side note, these engravings, the slower speeds were done at 25% power, and then the 10,000 millimeters a minute test was done at like 65% power, which is quite a bit scaled down compared to something like the Alfeo Laser 2. I was engraving at 100% power at 10,000 millimeters a minute. So you can definitely see that there's a lot more power there, but the controller just cannot keep up and therefore not really use all of that power. So in conclusion, this machine is amazing on paper, and at $600 is definitely a premium machine. You can get really awesome machines that can do a lot of what this can do for almost half the price. So the only reason why I would recommend this is if you really need that high power, if you're doing a bunch of metal engraving, if you're doing a lot of thicker cutting, and you're on the edge of between getting a CO2 laser or a diode laser, then this might be a good option for you. But if you don't want to do as much of that and just maybe engrave something on metal every once in a while, then something like the Alfeo Laser 2 is basically half the cost, engrave faster on wood, and in cutting is 70% as fast in most cases. So considering the price is not necessarily worth it. There also are quite a few little kinks, especially with this machine. I'm not sure if all of those are present on the Atomstack version of this, but there definitely is some amount of tinkering and some amount of mods that you will have to do to this machine for it to work properly. At $600, that is quite disappointing, especially since the Alfeo Laser 2 was a lot quicker to assemble and has a much better mechanical build. With that said, did I miss anything? If yes, leave a comment down below. Also make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I will definitely have more laser reviews coming for you. So if you like them, subscribe, hit the bell, all that good stuff. With that said, thanks for watching and until next time.